Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. The state of the city, the state of the state, the state of the union. Michael Bloomberg, Andrew Cuomo, Barack Obama. To talk about the states and the statesman and anything else he wants to is Errol Louis. Errol became anchor of NY1's award-winning political news hour Inside City Hall last November. Errol's a multimedia kind of guy, former writer, columnist, and editorial board member at the Daily News, radio drive time host on WWRL, and still a contributor at CNN. Welcome, Errol.
Good to be here.
Let's talk about NY1 and your anchoring Inside City Hall. First question, is Andrew ever going to come on the station?
Is Andrew ever going to come? Full disclosure, my wife works in the administration. She's executive vice president of the Empire State Development Corporation. She has asked him personally. I have asked him personally. He says he's going to come on eventually. I'm not holding my breath.
I mean, the Cuomo clock has, thousands of days where he has not responded to you guys. Now, there were false rumors in the Post in early November, I guess the day after the election, that Cuomo would come on. So those rumors obviously weren't true.
They had no basis in fact.
And you've got an in and he still isn't there?
Look, let me just say in defense of NY1, which has not had him on in all 4 years
right.
of him as an attorney general. Try and think of a time where he's sat down and done a one-on-one TV interview with anybody. He hasn't done it.
No.
We're the only ones who have sort of made that fact public.
And almost daily. I mean, I look at
it's everybody's Cuomo clock.
I look at the clock. This is a new life for you, isn't it? It's a different pace, different focus, different routines.
Very different.
How different?
Very different. Well, I've told my print friends that it's not just like reporting with a camera around. It's just very different. It's a group enterprise, as you know from doing this show. You can't really make a move without 10 other people coming along with you. So the days of just kind of deciding, hey, there's a story breaking in East New York, I'm going to jump on the train and head out there, those days are over.
Talk about a day in the life. Last Tuesday, you sat with Joyce Pernick and I to talk about the mayor's State of the City address.
Yes.
What was that day like? Walk us through what Errol Louis does in a day.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for coming in and helping us analyze it. But look, on any given day, I get up, I check all of the papers, and papers, it's all on my iPad. So, the Times, the Post, the News, you find out what's going on. I look at Politico.com. I watch TV a little bit or flip channels, see what's going on, what people are talking about. Check Twitter, which is increasingly an important place to really get a quick look at what other people are talking about.
Whose tweets do you look at?
I follow over 1,000 people.
Wow.
But it includes lots and lots and lots of different people, including some who are not names anywhere.
Sure.
So it includes people who anchor national television programs and their producers and their editors and the writers. But then also there are people who are just very insightful, who like to chime in on stuff and draw stuff to public attention. And they're they're the secret weapon, actually. They're fascinating people. They're people who, I don't know if they're disabled or what's going on in their life, but they just sit there and they follow politics.
And not only do they follow it, they're good. They're really good. They're professionals at what they do. They're very knowledgeable and very engaged. What's been the biggest surprise so far, moving from a column in the Daily News, editorial board work, and a contributor to CNN, and now you're doing a daily show? What's
I think I'm surprised and impressed and gratified, frankly, by the number of people in this town who are both watching the show and who are thinking and talking about politics. And the people talk about politics in lots of different ways. And the beauty of the show is that because we have an hour every day, we can figure out, or we try to figure out, different ways to talk to different slices of people about politics. So, for example, interviewing the head of the Metropolitan Opera, because they're going to do an opera, Nixon in China. Well, that's politics.
Right. Right.
Or to talk to, our very popular segment on Wednesday, where we have the political rundown, and we have Herson Barrero and Curtis Sliwa, who's kind of, they're both a couple of wise guys,
Right.
And they just kind of kick it around. And then we have the New York One wise guys, former mayor, former senator, former state controller.
Right.
And they talk about, reporters talk about it. A lot of people talk about politics in this town, and they do it differently. And it can almost sound like a foreign language. And so what I try to do with the show is make clear to everybody, it's like, look, I'll show you how other people are talking about politics, and I can hopefully be a little bit of a translator for them.
Okay, so you start by looking at the computer, reading or the iPad, you read the papers, etc. When do you actually get into the office, and what do you do when you get there?
Well, I usually get in
studio.
around, I'm on TV usually around midday. We do something called the Political Buzz, where based on a short consultation with the political director, Bob Hart, and the other producers of the show, we decide, well, okay, this is what we already had lined up. Here's what's breaking. Here's where our reporters are out doing. And all of that stuff is being set up beginning in the wee hours of the morning. But by about noon, it's kind of clear what our show is going to look like and really what the story of the day is going to be. So I go on the air and I do the Political Buzz and tell people 3 or 4 big stories that we're following for the day.
And you do this essentially by yourself, but in consultation of what the major items are. How consultative is it?
It's TV. Nobody does anything by themselves.
That's true. That's true.
So no, I get on and I do a little talk back or a little conversation with whoever's anchoring the news that day, whether it's Janine Ramirez or Roma Torre or somebody else, and just kind of let them know what's coming.
Okay, so you do the buzz. Then what happens?
Lunch or a workout or something like that,
So you've got space in between. I mean, when you were doing WWRL, you were on for hours and hours in a day. Do you miss the give and take, the constant bombardment from listeners?
Do I miss getting up at 3:30 every single morning?
Well, my mother-in-law misses you a lot.
Do I miss getting up at 3:30 and being on the air from 6 to 9 every morning? Once in a while, I do. Once in a great while.
Did you miss the juice? Is there different juice that you get out, charge that you get out of doing radio or print that you don't get in TV? And what charge do you get on TV?
Well, you know what? It's a very different job.
Go ahead.
I mean, look, morning drive time radio is about waking people up. They're getting up, they're multitasking. That's the beauty of radio. They're cooking, or they're driving, or they're taking a shower, or something like that. They're getting dressed, and you've got to give them a little energy, tell them what's going on in the world, keep it quick, because although it's 3 hours, it is known in radio that the average listener might be tuning in for about 15 minutes.
Right, so you got to get them.
So you're doing like 12 shows, basically. You got to put all your elements in every 15-minute package.
Now, do you script it? How do you do it?
Radio?
Yeah.
Oh, God,
no. It's just total free flowing.
I mean, you got to know what you're talking about.
No, I know.
And you banter, and of course, WWRL, their slogan was "Radio that listens."
Right.
So it was a call-in show.
Sure.
People could call in for the whole 3 hours.
Sure.
And every Friday, I did nothing but call-ins. No guests, no agenda. People would just call in and we would talk.
And sometimes when I would listen, it would be, how do you respond to some of this stuff? Because as you pointed out, some of these folks know stuff that you had no idea about. How do you grapple with that?
Well, this is me. I don't know what other people do.
Go ahead.
But I think humility is part of the job. And so if somebody says something that I find interesting, I'd say, well, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that, and then you ask them more questions about it.
And you never, in a sense, I mean, you engaged folks, but you never, the tone never got to the point where it was argumentative. Your style
that's bad radio. That's bad TV,
and it's much more conversational than, in a sense, gotcha and confrontation.
That's bad TV. It's bad radio, and there are people who do that.
Right.
They browbeat the callers and try to humiliate the guests, and I don't know why that is ever attempted, because those folks never really last very long.
I would think not. Which side of the table do you like better? I mean, you've worked both. You're on one side of the table now, and usually you're on the other side of the table. Do you like one of the sides better than the other?
Not really. I mean, it's
different stuff.
It's different. It's different. And look, it's the difference between eating in a restaurant and running a restaurant. Do I like to eat in restaurants? Yeah, I'm eating in a restaurant right now.
I don't
have to worry. I'm not worried right now about the timing, the lighting, or nobody's talking in my ear, and that's great. Now the rest of the time, I'm trying to conduct a conversation and make sure the guests are all being heard, and make sure the conversation is touching on points that I know we want to touch on. So it might look the same to the viewer, but it's really very, very different.
Okay, look at that hour. How do you break up the hour in terms of your mind on a day-to-day basis? How do you break it up?
Well, I mean, there are set pieces, right? So on Monday we have Consultants Corner, we have political consultants. Tuesday we have the wise guys, the former elected officials. Wednesday we have the political rundown with Sliwa and Barrero. Friday we have the Reporters Roundtable, and Thursday is open.
Okay, so you've got a rhythm and a routine. What drives the stories, the events of the day? Do you do what we might call enterprise or investigative stuff?
Yes, the first part of the show is the politics of the day, and then there's always one of those set segments. So, and then in between, that's where you get your guests in to talk about the news of the day or to bring in some enterprise reporting and so forth. We have a great political team. We have about 5 reporters. They're always out doing both enterprise and chasing down the stories of the day. So they're very busy. And they're in we have one in Albany and 4 or 5 down here.
How much of that broadcast is live, or is it all tape?
It depends on what we're doing. The first part of the broadcast is always live.
Okay.
When you hear me reading the news at the top
That's
of the show,
it. No, well,
that's always live. That's always
okay.
live. The interviews, it depends. You can't demand that a U.S. senator show up at 7:15 and leave at 7:45.
Right.
So we tape some of those during the day, and sometimes we'll have a talk back with Albany, or it depends. It's we have to get to the news. The news is not always going to come to us.
Right.
So some of it's taped, some of it's live.
Okay, here we are the day of Obama's State of the Union address.
Yes.
Today and tomorrow, what are the stories on New York One?
Good question. We're gonna do. We're gonna.
And in a sense, we're talking about last night.
Yeah. I'll leave that up to you. I'll leave that up to you.
Go ahead.
We're gonna be talking with the star, the producer, and the head of the Met on this Nixon in China.
Okay.
We're going to also have some guests in because I'm going to be anchoring the State of the Union.
Right.
So I'm going to be up late tonight. We're going to do a regular show, and then at 9 o'clock when State of the Union starts, I'll be doing some anchoring, some commentary. We'll have a couple of guests on to help us explain it. We'll also take the Republican response, and we'll do a little commentary around that, and hopefully we'll be done by about 11 tonight.
What do you expect the president to say? In fact, I mean, he will have already said it by the time this is. What do you see as the State of the Union and the state of Barack Obama's presidency?
Well, there are 2 things that go on in every State of the Union speech. The first is that the president tries to sketch out his vision, his broad view of where the country is and where he wants to take the country. He doesn't get that many opportunities to talk to the whole nation all at once, and so they never pass up this opportunity. The other thing, though, is that he's also talking to the federal workforce. And folks never really think about this, but there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in Washington, and they don't get a memo from their boss the way most private sector employees do. They have to watch something like the State of the Union address. Up to a surprisingly senior level in government, they are watching this stuff to find out what it is that they are supposed to do. And when you hear a little throwaway line that you or I might not even notice, something like, and that's why we're going to increase the amount of parkland that the public can use. There's a whole bunch of people in the Department of Interior who are all of a sudden going to sit up and say, okay, that's what I have to do this year.
Okay, so, I mean, you've got these multiple audiences that me as an audience member doesn't really appreciate.
Right. That's right. And so what he says on every given line, and I actually found this out just from years ago from being a community activist. When we worked on, this was the Clinton administration, the community development financial institutions, which were credit unions, loan funds, micro-enterprise groups to help the poor. We'd spent months and months and months pushing for legislation and begging people to consider this and so forth. And then the president got up and talked about it in the State of the Union. And I knew that all across the nation, hundreds of people, just like I, were jumping up and down in our living room saying, we got it, because then you can go to the government and say, look, the president said you have to do this. So that to me is one of the more interesting parts of all of this. And it's also why you have to really pay attention to all of it. The press tends to focus on who's sitting in next to the first lady in the president's box.
Right, and TV
how many times did they
up
stand up?
Right.
How many times did they applaud? And that's fine, but there's a lot more going on in the speech.
What do you expect the themes to be? I mean, after all, in some ways, this couldn't be seen as the kickoff of the 2012 re-election.
Oh, you better believe it.
So, I mean, There's got to be big themes here. What are the big themes? What ought he be talking about?
Well, first of all, don't be so sure that there's going to be big themes.
Okay.
If you remember the way Bill Clinton got reelected in 1996,
right.
He was like the governor of America, right? He wanted to have
the governor of Arkansas of America.
he wanted to have 1,000 more cops. He wanted to have a nationwide 311 system. Yeah. And
can he afford to do that? Obama isn't Obama in a different place?
I don't know if he can afford not to. I mean, he moved a lot of the big parts of the agenda, right? Ending don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
Naming a couple of Supreme Court justices, the health care law that he paid.
The nuclear weapons treaties with Russia.
So he's moved quite a lot now. So now to get into re-election mode,
go ahead.
It's going to be jobs. It's going to be jobs above everything.
1 through 7 is jobs.
Yes, exactly. And then the 8th might be some throwaway about bipartisanship and let's have a better political culture, which has always been his theme and it's one of his core beliefs. I don't want to make light of that.
No, right.
But I'm not expecting anything huge. I don't think he's going to come out and say, I call on this session, this Congress in this session to pass comprehensive immigration reform.
No.
I mean, he might say that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he let that one go.
Right, and we certainly wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen.
Right.
Okay, let's move to the state level then, the state of the state. Cuomo gives his address, budget's coming up. How do you cut $10 billion and not raise taxes, not borrow money? How does this governor actually confront these huge short-term and structural problems?
Well, what the governor has said repeatedly, and we should take him at his word until we know otherwise, what he has said is that if all you do is stop the growth in education and Medicaid in particular, you almost wipe out the entire deficit. So what he's talking about doing is putting a halt to the explosive rise of certain categories of cost. And that will be a very serious fight, but that doesn't involve fundamentally changing, say, the social contract of the state, the way I think a lot of people are hoping it might. In other words, there are a lot of people who are using this as an excuse to go after organized labor.
Right. I want to talk about
to go after pensions and so forth. That's not, even if you got it done, it wouldn't cure the current budget deficit. So to a certain extent, people are kind of playing politics around that. What the governor is talking about doing, though, is slowing the explosive year-to-year increase in certain categories of expense and doing it quickly in order to get rid of the deficit.
But the bottom line is you got to cut. You got to fire people and you got to cut spending by $10 billion.
Yes, but you know what? I mean, when they say we're going to cut 15,000 possible positions, 10,000, 15,000 state workers, something like half of that is attrition. So the person walks out the door and retires, you just don't replace them. That's very different from saying 10,000 of you got a pink slip.
Right. I mean, clearly there is a strategic element to saying we're going to lose 15,000 jobs.
And consolidating certain agencies so that now, one person who was maybe a compliance officer for insurance and a compliance officer for banking, well, now we only need one of you because we're going to have somebody deal with insurance and banking at the same time.
You mentioned pensions, and Mike, almost a transition into Mike Bloomberg's State of the City address. Public employees with their pensions and health benefits have become sort of the bête noire of this whole narrative.
Yes.
That these are the bad guys, or I guess in a sense, we are the bad guys. And the way to solve the problem is to go after public worker pension and health benefits. There's this emerging conventional wisdom. What's the play here?
Well, I mean, look, I think of it as an agenda that probably goes back about 80 years. There are some people for whom the answer to every question is, let's get rid of the unions.
Right.
So those people are in some ways pushing this debate with a fervor that it really doesn't deserve. I think the unions are finding their voice. I mean, they're answering back, and they're answering with arguments like the fact that the average DC 37, that's the largest of the city unions, mostly administrators, their average pension is $17,000 a year, which is enough to get you down to the office and apply for food stamps because you'd be living in poverty if that was all you had to rely on.
But there's no counter narrative out there. There's no counter voice out there talking about the necessity for pensions and unions, et cetera. It seems the narrative is all in one direction.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, but you know what the labor unions are telling me, and they said this on my show. They said, listen, we don't really care if they want to go out and make all of these headlines. We'll push back a little bit, but the reality is this stuff gets done at the bargaining table.
Right.
This stuff gets done in the legislative chamber. And, you know, they're going to have a very hard time making this stuff happen at the bargaining table because we have rights and there are laws that govern the collective bargaining. And a lot of the people who are making a lot of the noise, the think tank people and so forth,
right.
they're not going to be at the bargaining table, you know, and the unions will be. So they understand what they have to do, and they're going to do what they're elected to do, which is look out for the benefits of their workers.
One of the interesting things about the Cuomo approach is that he's continuing the election campaign into governing. I mean, it's almost now a permanent campaign that governing is campaigning. He's got this huge war chest. He's got independent expenditures by business community. This is really a novel approach to governance in New York State, no?
Well, it was tried 4 years ago. Elliot Spitzer tried the same thing. He had a war chest, if you may remember, of about $5 million. He said he was going to target individual legislators who didn't come along.
Yeah,
he
that's
was
true.
prepared to run ads. And what I was told was that Spitzer's people thought that $5 million was a lot until they found out that SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, had $70 million. Yeah.
Right, right.
So I'm not sure where that's going to go. I mean, I've interviewed the people from the Committee to Save New York, and they're raising a bunch of money, and they're running these ads. But, you know, again, advertising is not going to determine what happens at the collective bargaining.
Yeah, but he's stumping across the state. I mean, clear. And Andrew Cuomo is not Elliot Spitzer. He doesn't have Spitzer's hubris, arrogance, and I am the steamroller, expletive deleted. So the personality will supplement the position where it didn't happen with Spitzer.
Well, that's right, and it's not just personality. He's also, I think, being a little bit smarter about it. I mean, he's given his state of the state address, and I don't know if it's word for word, but he's given it multiple times. He's gone to different parts of the state. Now, when the governor of the state shows up in the North Country or in Jamestown, he is the news that day.
Right.
And everybody from the county officials to the state legislators, they all
both
know
parties,
that
right?
he is the story. And so he is very much trying to bolster and keep his popularity high in anticipation of maybe not a fight necessarily, but a conversation with the other big players. And so he's going to make sure that it'll be easier for them to come along with him than to fight him.
Well, I mean, you go back to Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, you know, speak quietly and carry the stick, unlike Chris Christie, who doesn't speak quietly and wields the stick. We'll see. I think one of the emerging stories is going to be the comparison of Andrew Cuomo as governor with Chris Christie, both in terms of both their styles and in terms of their activities and accomplishments.
And national ambitions.
And national ambition. I mean, we could have them running against each other as vice presidential or presidential candidates. And when? 2016?
Oh, boy, yeah.
They're young. They could go.
Yes, the entire New York press corps.
We'll go crazy. Oh, are you kidding me? Oh, it's the best. It's the best. It's the Subway Series.
Yeah.
Let's go to the state of the city, Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg gives this entire speech, doesn't mention the snowstorm once, doesn't mention one of the giant screw-ups in memory. What's with the mayor?
Well, I mean, you know, it's the
Not even a little mayor?
Well, you know, they're going to. We've been talking about the Lindsay snowstorm in '69 for over 40 years now.
Oh, I lived through it. I was in Queens.
Okay, well, I think Mike Bloomberg probably knows that people are going to be talking about this for a long time, and to the extent that he doesn't want it to become part of his legacy, I think he'd like to turn the page, and I can't fault him for that because it was a horrible, horrible episode.
No, but the narrative seems to be that Humpty Dumpty had a great fall and is not. You can't put him back together again. Was that speech effective in sort of gluing the egg back together again?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I'll tell you, he did make one. It was interpreted as trying to make amends for the mishandling of the aftermath of the blizzard.
Right.
A gesture to the outer boroughs, the idea of changing the rules so that outer borough livery cars can.
Excuse me, that ain't a huge deal out there.
Listen. Let me
You
tell
know,
you as a
Borough
Brooklynite,
Mike.
Mr. New Jersey. Let me tell you.
Oh, nice.
Let me tell you as a Brooklynite.
Oh, yeah.
That is a big, big deal. If he can get it done.
Okay. Oh, man. I mean, come on, Errol.
Listen, how do you think I got to the studio today? I had to call up a livery car company, and they came, and it was this beat-up old cab, and the guy had to get out and open the broken door, and we had to haggle over the price. Nobody needs that.
So, I mean, I miss the resonance of this issue because I live in New Jersey? Come on, give me a
I'm
break.
telling you, for outer borough people, this would be big. It's not insignificant.
Okay.
Does it make it for the snowstorm? Probably not.
And then the mayor had a couple of bad.
I mean, let's give you one more statistic.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah. I touched a nerve here.
20% of the city lives in Manhattan. 95% of the street hails, 95% of the yellow cab pickups are in Manhattan
Right.
and at the airports. The rest of the city is completely ignored.
No kidding.
understood.
I understand that.
It's a disgrace. It should have ended a long time ago.
Oh, man, you're really into this stuff.
Hey.
The mayor's had Kathy Black controversy, the city time controversy, the blizzard, and then all in that context term limits. Is the mayor a lame duck, or is just the power of the office so substantial that he can move an agenda forward?
I mean, lame duck suggests that people will frustrate his attempts to lead the city
Right.
Because they know he's going to be leaving.
Right.
I don't think that's going to be the case because the mayor is so powerful.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Now, what he will get, I think, is a lot more pushback on certain issues. You know, and look, here's what I think is going on.
Go.
The mayor is somebody who succeeded best when he surrounded himself with officials like Ray Kelly, Nick Scappetta, people who were known quantities in the city who were New Yorkers, right?
The permanent government. Go ahead.
Well, John Doherty, the
Okay.
guy who used to
Right.
work on a sanitation
Right.
truck, okay,
Right.
who runs the sanitation
Right.
department. Increasingly, he's brought in people, his new deputy mayor for economic development, Kathy Black, people who are from completely outside of that realm. And so I think now we've got a lot of little mini Bloombergs out there, people who are maybe
This is
good
not
managers.
necessarily a compliment.
Well, you know what? It's a change, and it can lead to a disconnect with a lot of the voices that are out there, the civic groups, the public opinion, the press, I guess in some cases. That, you know, look, if you knew Nick Scappetta going back 25 years, you would know that his word was good if he said a certain
Right.
thing. If there's somebody out there that you just don't know from a
Right.
hole in the wall,
Right.
there are civic leaders who are going to say, you know, I'd like to believe Kathy Black, but I don't know Kathy Black.
Okay.
And she hasn't done anything. She hasn't been part of the big fights that we've waged together on whatever side
Right.
for the last 25 years.
Okay. I want to continue, but time's up. My special thanks and congratulations to Errol Louis. Join me next week when we take the grand tour of New York and the world's treasure, Central Park. See you then. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.